Linda, could you give us the invocation?
Let's pray. Holy and righteous Father, we come to you tonight and thank you for our city, for the people in our city, for the governing body here, and for all those who serve in this city. We thank you for your mercy and your grace. We thank you that your plans for us are for good and not for evil, to prosper us and give us a future and a hope. Lord, your word says, unless the Lord builds the house or the city, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. Father, we here yield to you tonight to build this city and watch over this city by your Spirit as you move on the hearts and the minds of those gathered here. You, O Lord, are the answer to every issue that surround us, and we thank you that you have imparted your wisdom to those gathered here tonight. We decree that change is coming to Freeport, Illinois. Personal change, good change, change in our families, our education, businesses. We declare that prosperity and unity is coming to Freeport, Illinois. This is not by might nor by power, but by your Spirit that works in, through, and to us. Blessed be your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Linda. Now we'll officially call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Mayor Miller,
Here.
Alderpersons Borneman,
Here.
McClanathan,
Here.
Ross,
Here.
Parker,
Here.
Busker,
Here.
Brashaw,
Here.
Mysick,
Here.
and Berberay.
Here.
Could you please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Alderman Busker? And the meeting is yours, Alderman Busker.
Okay. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Alderperson Bradshaw, seconded by Alderman Parker. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. There are no public comments? All right, sorry. Approval of the minutes from the Committee of the Whole meeting held on May 13th. Do we have a motion?
So moved. Second.
All right, moved by Alderman Mysick, seconded by Alderman Ross. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. There are no public comments, so we will move right into discussion of approval of a quote from ComEd to switch 5 city buildings to LED lighting, presented by Manager Crow. Manager?
Thank you very much. So we, and I'll give credit to Diane, she is taking the lead on this. We have been taking advantage over in the Water and Sewer Department of the various ComEd programs to change out and become more energy efficient. As part of this program, Diane attended a webinar that dealt with LED swap out in the building. So ComEd has 2 contractors that they come in and do a survey of it, and ComEd came in and did the survey of the city's buildings and presented to us last week THARE is the building, is a swap out program so we can change LED lighting across the board. The savings, the original the ROI that they have that says 1 or 2 years ROI is based upon us paying for electrical. We do not pay for electricity except in the water and sewer building, which is because that's a business-like activity. The other place is street lights. But the payback is, talking with them, is 7 years based upon swap out of equipment. That is, so the overall cost of the program to us was be $60,000, but then the payback, we get $31,000 in grants back from ComEd, and I know Water and Sewer have been very successful with the VFDs on this, and then so that would give us payback on that, and the overall cost to swap all of our buildings is $29,000, a little over $29,000, and that would put LED lights. LED lights are more energy efficient. They last 10 to 15 years. This also changes out the switches for the building, so when people are not in the building, and in fact, I've got the Thera representative here, if anybody has any questions on that. And it really makes the buildings efficient, moves them towards being more of a green environment as we go forward. We're here to answer questions. We'd like to put this on the council meeting for the 17th for approval.
Discussion?
Chair.
Alderperson McClanathan.
Manager Crowe, and then also the representative. Could you talk a little bit in regards to what are some of the things that are going to get switched out on there?
I'm going to ask, because I am not, go ahead and step up to the, and we can talk more in detail.
I'm Dan Bischoff. I'm an energy advisor for Thayer Lighting. Thayer Lighting's what's called a service provider. We work with ComEd. We've been working with them for the last 11 years since the incentive programs were initiated. And we're a lighting specialist, a commercial industrial lighting specialist. So we actually implement the program and do the upgrades, and then what Lowell was saying, of the total cost, the incentives actually are paid to Thayer Lighting, so you would only actually foot the bill for the $29,000 or so. You wouldn't have to wait for ComEd to pay you the rebate. The rebate would come to Thayer Lighting.
Follow.
Alderperson McClanathan.
Thank you. So as Manager Crowe was saying, looking at it, from the city, since we don't pay for the electricity in those buildings, we're kind of looking at what are some of the other benefits. And he had mentioned, obviously not having to replace, actually, the purchase of lights as often, kind of upgrading some of the switches and things of that nature. Could you highlight some of that so when we're explaining the benefits of the program?
It's a good question. It's kind of it's a little bit of an unusual situation. Well, not unusual. It's actually pretty common where the public sector entity doesn't actually pay the bill. So what's the justification for spending the money? Well, it's the right thing to do. It's good for the environment, but the maintenance savings are the things that we had talked about. Besides an energy savings of a projected energy savings of an estimated was it $12,000 per year. There's a maintenance savings of about $3,200 per year. That's all the light bulbs and ballasts that you're no longer purchasing and replacing as they burn out, and then including the labor time to make those changes.
I think some of the things, I'll give you an example that you're talking about here, so I've got it here. So the front, let's see if this is the island garage, or the bay, this is Central Station. So they'll be replacing the strip lightings, the bay lightings, the 9-watt LED dimmers, 3 lamp 4-watt outputs, 5-watt 75-watt van lead canopy. Those are what are replacing it, but they're replacing the 3 lamps, 4 foot in each one of the offices, the 200 exterior, the upstairs. There's lights for the 60-watt incandescent, 3 lamps, the garage lamps, which are the hanging garage lamps, the 75-watt incandescent, the 6-lamp T5 high bay. I got the chiefs shaking their head. So basically all the lamps that we've got throughout it. And so some of these fixtures, they're replacing the whole fixture. Some of them, they're just replacing the lamps. And I know Scott Townsend tried to get this program worked, last year for the fire station.
Additional follow-up. So you still expect the city to recoup the return on investment within, at least within, if not earlier than the expected lifespan of these newer, more modern equipment, correct?
Correct. Just based on the maintenance savings, that's lower. I think you came up with the 7 years.
7 years,
Yeah.
right.
The expected lifespan of a LED, let's say these were 4-foot fluorescents in here, but they're not, they're LED above us, but the LED life expectancy based on a 50-hour week is about 19 years. So that's it's pretty much a set it and forget it. You won't have to think about your lighting for the next decade or two. There's some potential maintenance, but not much.
So bottom line, we're able to upgrade to a more efficient system, a more modern system that's going to recoup the costs well within the lifespan of these new units. So it's at the end of the day, it's a good deal for the residents.
I agreed, and the ComEd asked if they wanted to have a rep come out here tonight. They offered, and I said I can probably take care of it. But they also mentioned to me that of all the fire departments in the entire ComEd territory, because we're talking about the fire departments here, they're already LED. They've all taken advantage of the ComEd incentive program. It is one of the better utility company incentive programs in the country, I understand. I mean, if we're in Wisconsin or some of the surrounding states, they might pay this much incentive toward the upgrades. ComEd is putting over 50%, which is huge. So it makes it more feasible.
And the biggest impact, both payback and also replacement, is in the Island Street garage. Surprise, surprise, one of the oldest buildings we have around. So, you know, the overall installation before payback is $25,000 there.
And the last thought is, like in that building, you'll be replacing the lights in there as they burn out, and when you do so, you're going to replace them with LED. That's the world is going to LED, so you'll spend the money anyway. Why not put it through the program and let the utility company cover half the cost?
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Alderperson Bradshaw.
thank you.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, let's see, you know, one thing I also want to emphasize with this change-out project is that, like on the LED bulbs, if there's a 20-year cycle between change-outs, I guess on the T8s or the T12s, it may be a 5-year cycle. So if you have someone changing one of those fixtures up there, you're going to be up there 4 or 5 times compared to only once with the LED to where there's the potential for a workers' comp claim. So that there in itself, I think provides value.
Alderperson Bradshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My opinion is when they've done the LED lights, they tend to be a lighter glow, add more light, and our constituents are always asking for more light for better safety measures. And this is one way I think that we could provide that. I realize it's not covering the whole city with this specific project, but I think it's a good way to go. And Manager Crowe, I'm sure in your opinion you would consider this best practice for most cities.
This is best practice. Cities, it's moving towards, if we had it from the very beginning, we talked about making an LEED silver, LEED gold building, but this is the way to move these older buildings to retrofit them to make them the best practice.
Thank you, sir.
Chair,
Alderperson Boardman.
this might be better fitted for city manager. So we're looking at 5 buildings, right?
Yes.
Is we own more than 5 buildings. Why is it only 5 buildings?
Well, so this building is completely LED back. The water and sewer has been in the process of replacing all of theirs. The new building, the new water treatment facilities are being built at a LEED, so was it LEED silver?
We're looking to go that way. Plus then, one thing with it is that when you involve ComEd at the beginning, during the design phase, there's greater incentives.
So those buildings are all being done. The water and sewer, we have been, Tom has been very aggressive out there in the water and sewer. So we have 5 buildings. That's all we have left that have not been swapped out.
Okay, so this gets us up to speed on all buildings. All right, follow up.
Go ahead.
when it comes to logistics, who's going to be coming in and changing out the fixtures and the lights? Like what employees? Is it you or ComEd or a city employee?
So prevailing wage labor is built into the quotes, and we contract out all the work. So we work with numerous electrical contractors throughout the region, and one of them would be chosen to do the work for Freeport.
Okay. And then is Thayer, is this deal exclusive through Thayer, or you just work with ComEd in this region?
So I don't know what the number, we're called service providers now, and I'm not sure how many there are of us anymore. At one point, I think there was as many as 80 in the ComEd territory. We're one of the handful that work Rockford in like a 2-hour drive circle around Rockford. We do a lot of work with the program. ComEd likes us. We've been around 30 years, and we follow all the rules to the T, and we understand the program inside and out, so we know how to properly implement it for our customers. And so I think when Diane went to the meeting, she talked to them, and then ComEd called Thayer to ask, and I also happen to know Scott because we upgraded all the fire departments in Boone County and in Belvedere and so forth, and they all know each other, and we all got to talking.
And I, when I talked to, because they come to all the ILCMA conferences too, and they're for this area, and they also presented to Region 1 about Planning Council about upgrading, and there was was ComEd's recommendation to us.
And by the way, I meant to ask you, I think there's some lighting at the airport.
That's right. I forgot about the
Some
airport.
wall
We haven't
packs.
swapped the airport out, so.
That there may be a little work out there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Alderperson Messick. On this quote, it doesn't give specific details on the lighting that's chosen. I mean, it gives some on incandescent, going to LED and so forth. Like the chosen spectra, is it like a daylight type of bulb in most cases, or?
Whatever's in place, like in the offices, we'll ask the people that work there if they want it brighter or what they would like. And the Kelvin temperatures won't make any difference to the price, but we'll typically ask what they would prefer. If it's a shop or a public works, we'll put the 5,000 daylight in there, which is the brightest possible for those environments. We've done so many jobs, we kind of know what people want, but we always ask questions and see if they have any preference. With the oldest fixtures, we'll put in new high bays because that's the most cost effective in certain areas. If they're pretty nice fixtures in pretty good shape, we'll just retrofit them to LEDs with kind of take the guts of the fixture and still use that and convert it over to an LED. That's the most cost effective way. It's also approved by the program. So we have to follow all their rules, and we have to use products that are all on their approved list and so forth.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other?
Chair, or do you have another question? Okay.
Alderperson McFarland?
I would make a motion that we move it on to the next scheduled council meeting with a recommendation for approval.
Motion by McClanathan, seconded by Parker. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Moving on. Discussion regarding residency requirements for non-union staff.
So I want to remind council this is strictly non-union. We are in contract negotiations, so this is this strictly deals with the non-union personnel. This went back. Now it worked for me. Figures it doesn't work. Yeah, okay, got it. All right. So, okay, I'm looking for there we go. gotta be the old adage, you gotta be 10% smarter the equipment you're trying to operate. So, he changed pads on me this morning, and we ran through it this morning, and then, so, what Scott Townsend, Chief Townsend actually did was he updated, and there it goes back. Sorry, guys. All right. I gotta get the IT guy up here to work it. He went out of the slideshow, and I don't know why I didn't. We got two opened, that's why. Yeah, technology. All right. So, Chief Townsend updated this to reflect, because we've had a lot of promotions, but this reflects, so currently we have 2 of the non-union that are, just a reminder, with the residency requirements for non-union it's the 4 surrounding townships, and so around the city, and we have right now, all of those that are in yellow are outside those residency requirements. So we have 2 non-union that are outside those residency requirements. For as we go forward, so the discussion is we look at promotions going forward, everybody in yellow is outside those residency requirements. So police, the union, so we just give an idea, because one of the discussion points that we talked about when we presented this and what the ordinance is, the old ordinance that we looked at 8 months ago, I believe it was approximately that, was 15 miles, and this kind of gives you the idea of where everybody is outside 15 miles. As the residency, this is everybody in the department that's out there. So we have 2 non-union that are outside that 15-mile residency. One of the options that we talked about was also outside 20 miles. The current union contract does allow them to go out to 25 miles, and the current fire contract allows, it goes, so police is outside 25 miles, fire is 20 miles, correct, on the current contract. So that kind of gives you where we're at on it. So the discussion is as you know, we have changed all our department heads are required to live within the city limits. We do have one that's grandfathered in as we go forward. The concept was we go to 15 miles. If we go forward with this, what we'd like to do is grandfather those that are currently living outside that 15 miles and set that the 15 miles as our standard for anybody that is hired going forward for non-union. The discussion that we had the last time 8 months ago was whether the non-union should also, when they get promoted out of the ranks of the union into the non-union, whether we should also require them to go to that. The feeling is, discussion with internally, is that this should be strictly apply to the new hires as we go forward. And I'm going to open that up for council discussion.
Sure.
Fellow Person McClanathan.
Thank you. I appreciate us coming back and looking at this again, because as you saw with the slides, it's an issue that continues to remain. As you saw on that first slide there, talking about who's impacted from fire, there's a lot of individuals that aren't, still 8 months down the road, we're still in the same situation, and we have a lot of people not in compliance. There was a strong consensus not to be punitive in regards to this, but how do we fix this going forward? So if we take fire from its current 4 townships requirements and put it at a mileage, that actually kind of expands it a bit for the fire. And if we take the police, which is currently at the 20 for the non-union, and kind of meet in the middle there, on that 15, it gives us uniformity both with police and fire non-union. And I do like the idea of kind of the grandfathering in. Because right now, I mean, if we weren't to grandfather in right now, I mean, it would be a mess if we started actually enforcing our ordinances. If we're going to have an ordinance on the books, we need to be enforcing it, but it'd be a mess to enforce it if we didn't look forward to this as opposed to, granting some dispensation for the past. The question I would have for council is, I see that some of the language has put in place in regards to grandfathering, but I'd ask between now and the next time that we look at this, whether it's the next council or further, if we could just double check that last thing that Manager Crowe said, how it's not only going to not affect individuals, if you're currently in the non-union and you're out of compliance, that's okay for now unless you want to move, which it says on here, but can we make sure that it's specific for that it's new hires going forward only, so we don't get a situation where somebody's currently in the union, goes to a non-union position, and they're not covered by this right now?
That would be my question.
So we hadn't updated the ordinance from, this is the ordinance you saw 8 months ago. What we're doing is based upon the discussions that we've had, is that we wanted to grandfather all those that are in, but apply it going forward, so new hires understand what they're being hired under, that if they go into the non-union positions, they would then be reflected on that 15 miles. Because we have, I mean, even Scott has some Chief Townsend has some non-union that are living outside. He has one or two that are non-union that are living outside the 4 towns.
Chair. All right, so what we have in front of us was the old language, and you just wanting us to confirm that, yes, that is what you want
Right, the new,
us to bring, or you
the
bring back to
grandfather.
us? Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Alderperson Parker.
Sorry, I wasn't here last week to get this, but so I'm getting is that right now the non-union can live 20 miles, but we're wanting to reduce that to 15?
For all new hires going forward for the non-union,
Oh, okay, but the ones living there now are grandfathered.
grandfathered in.
Thank you.
Chair?
Alderperson Brescia.
Thank you. I noticed on page 3 of 4, where it says commencing November 1st, 2018 and thereafter, it specifies that 15 radius miles from the fire station. Notice of this residency requirement must be acknowledged in writing by the employee in the case of a promotion in which an employee was previously subject.
As we said, we're going to take that language out of it and
Right.
say strictly that the new hires are aware of this, so that all these are grandfathered. This was the ordinance that we had initially proposed 8 months ago. We have not, so that language that I talked about is not reflected in this ordinance.
Okay. Follow up, I'm sorry. I just saw that it wasn't struck out, so that's why I didn't know if that was still on the table. That we're just discussing at this time, and if we choose to have that struck out, it would be struck out on the ordinance if it moved forward, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, my mistake, thank you.
No, that's,
Chair, I just got a question just to clarify, because I'll probably get asked this question, but it's grandfathered in for the folks that already live outside of the 15-mile area. But if the union allows 20 or 25, it's not grandfathered for those folks.
well, see, we'll have to go, when they hire, what we're saying
Sure,
here is
sure,
when
for the new hires.
we're hired here, they get hired, they understand that if there's a difference between the union contract and non-union, it establishes a residency requirement within 15 miles for going forward for all non-union. So when they come onto the force, whether they're hired as fire and police today, they can live based upon whatever we negotiate.
Right.
But if they want to be promoted into a non-union position, that's so if you hire a new firefighter, you hire a new police officer today.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So it's essentially for the new hires going forward that they have this.
That's
So,
correct.
Thank you.
Chair.
McClanathan.
Thank you. I think that brings up a good point of, moving forward, because we're kind of resetting the table, and at the highest level, the rules are, at the highest level of the department, you're living in the city. When you're getting at that next level just below it, you're not necessarily having to live in the city, but you're having to live, closer, and then, at the union, it's whatever's gonna be bargained on that, that's fine. But moving forward, there's a couple things that are gonna be important. If we're gonna bring this continuity on it, I'd just ask from a council perspective that the administration assure us that going forward, we'll have better compliance with the ordinance as it's written, so we don't find ourselves in a situation where there's a disparity of enforcements. And then two, also at each department level, I think it's real important when, I don't know, I'm sure you guys give all kinds of orientation and training, but one of the things that should probably be brought up or presented in the packet is, hey, if you're looking to make this your career, here are some of the things you might want to think of. And, one of them obviously is residency. If you're looking to be in non-union someday, here's the requirements that we have. If you're looking to be a chief someday, here's what your requirements are. Just so somebody starting off can, make that decision and not have to wait to the point where they're testing and then thinking, oh, goodness, do I have to move?
Chair. Alderman Ross.
Yeah, but in regards to what Alderman McClanahan says, if he wants to be the chief one day, he has to live within the city residential city.
So I know the firefighters all know that because I've gone out and talked with all of them. So.
That's what I want, yeah, because I don't want to get it mixed up with the 15 miles.
No, if you're the fire chief or you're the police chief going forward, you must live in the city.
Chair. Alderman Burberry.
What's the practical impact of living within 15 miles, 20 miles on an individual's performance and ability to get to the job? Or is it just a standard that every city has and they want people to live within a certain district?
So I'll let them answer that. I'll answer one question on the city. There is a wide variety. Rockford right now is trying to bring everybody in, talking with Decatur. They've already brought everybody within the city. In fact, they've negotiated into their contracts to bring everybody within the city. It varies from community to community. There's no standard there. And with that, I'll let the two chiefs talk about the operational side.
Sure, it's, as far as the impact of the job, probably very little as far as the job. The quality of life could be some. It depends on where their spouse works many times, where they would like to send their children to school is a big thing, as everybody here knows. And it does vary from place to place. In some of the suburbs, there is no residency because some of them can't afford to live in some of those villages in some of those collar counties. I think that it's certainly I'm not the one to really to speak on this. I mean, obviously for a lot of obvious reasons. It's a personal choice and had I made that several years ago, I would still stay with the personal choice that I particularly made. That doesn't make me not, love the city any more than I already do. And I've said this before, and many of you heard this. If you ask my wife where I live, she would probably, here most of the time. But certainly, we understand and we'll abide whatever this council decides. Thank you.
Alderman Parker.
Just to clarify.
I really don't have a whole lot more to add. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
To what Chief Barklow said. I will add though that, we've been here in the city for going on 26 years. I've seen this thing go full circle. When I was hired, it was 4 townships. It went 12 miles, 15 miles, and now 20 miles for the firemen. The cops last year went to 25, or last contract went to 25. I don't think it has a lot of impact because if you're not home when you get the call to be called in, you're not home. So that part I don't really agree with. I think now with the dual incomes of households and wives, spouses being more impactful with the household, money flow, I guess, I think that's a major issue. Another thing from the fire department standpoint is about 10 years ago, we made a conscious effort to try to attract local talent, to keep local talent here in Freeport. We saw what the police were battling with hiring and then them bolting to higher paying jobs in the burbs. So we brought a lot of these guys in from Lena, German Valley, Forest, and Dakota. And that's where they live. That's their home, that's where they were born, they went to high school there. So they're very reluctant to come to Freeport. That doesn't mean that they're poor employees or that they don't love the city of Freeport. But nonetheless, they still have that loyalty to their community. The only thing I'm gonna say is no matter what number you put on it, there's always gonna be an issue. The 15-mile radius right now, as far as affects my department, probably just shifts one of my lieutenants that would be eligible to test for a staff position. That still leaves 4 outside. With our small departments, 45, 48 men, however we look at it, our pool to select from is very limited, and I don't think we want to, as a city, limit that pool. So I urge you to really take caution in this, because I do think that there is some down the road consequences for being short-sighted as far as a limit. And you're never going to please everybody, and I understand that. And just like Chief Barklow said, we'll abide exactly by what you guys pass. But they do have impact, and not all of it's positive. Thank you.
Chair, if I could respond to that.
Alderman McClanathan.
With fire, we're actually expanding your requirements. The problem is, right now, a large amount of the department's not complying with the ordinance. So I fail to see how us expanding on the part of fire could possibly be detrimental to fire.
Can I explain?
Because you're right now, you're the 4 townships, correct?
Correct.
And every one of those 4 townships is currently within 15 miles, correct?
No.
Which township is outside of 15 miles? Between Freeport, Silver Creek, Harlem, and I believe it's Florence. They're all,
Looking at, and I didn't have a radius, but looking at the miles traveled, we have guys that live in Durand, one lives outside of Shannon, one that lives up in Wisconsin.
those are outside of
Yes.
the current
Yes.
ordinance requirements.
And that 15-mile radius too.
Sure, so, but they're grandfathered in, and one, they're grandfathered in. 2, these aren't examples of people that are in compliance with our ordinance. These are people who are outside of our compliance, right?
The ones I'm speaking with are in compliance with the collective bargaining agreement, so they are in compliance. The 2 that are not have never been told that they had to live within the 4 townships. That was never, ever brought to their attention, ever. So that's,
Chair,
Alderman McClanathan.
there's gotta be a disconnect at my level, so help me out with that. Right now, our ordinance says for non-union personnel, 4 townships, correct?
That's correct.
All those townships are within a 15-mile radius of Freeport, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so
So,
if
but-
we were to implement this, even if we weren't grandfathering people, but if we were to implement this across the board, it's expanding the residency requirements for the non-union personnel of fire.
And that's correct. If you'll remember why Todd Allen brought this up was because when he initially broached this with council was because we had people that were not in compliance with the ordinance within the fire department, and he wanted to expand it to bring the department more in compliance, understanding that it was never enforced. And one of the original discussions that we would do was go forward and enforce it going forward. And that was one of the discussions that we had with that.
So we're grandfathering everybody, so everybody who's not in compliance with the current ordinance will be fine. It's only applying to new hires.
That's correct.
And as far as it pertains to fire, we're actually expanding the parameters. So there's gonna be broader parameters for non-union and fire, and everybody who's not in compliance right now, it's okay. And everybody who gets hired from day one will know that these are the requirements. Okay.
You're correct.
Manager Crow, one question, just to clarify here, talking about new hires into a position, that's just new hires onto the department, so if someone were to be promoted from lieutenant to captain, they would not have to follow the new residency requirements?
That's correct. This is strictly So we hired a firefighter today. If this ordinance were in place, when we had passed it 8 months ago, that firefighter would have to be compliant. The collective bargaining agreement currently gives him, is it 13 months, Scott, to come into compliance?
Correct.
So it would give them 13, knowing that he would have to come in to, if he wants to be promoted to the non-union ranks, he would have 13 months to get that location. And we give the same benefit to our department heads. When we hire our department heads, they were each given 6 months to locate within the city from their residence.
So realistically, this isn't gonna affect anybody for another 7 years minimum.
Well, I can't say 7 because we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, with the retirements and all. So.
Okay.
Chair, I'm sorry, I
Beret,
want
or
to
Boardman.
make it abundantly clear here. So right now, if there's I know we're talking about how this ordinance is going to affect non-union, i.e. management level people in both of those departments. So if you have somebody who is a union shift patrol officer, 5 years, and they're in whatever boundaries their collective bargaining agreement agrees to, which may be more than 15 miles. So hypothetically, that person wants to get a promotion into a non-union position, and they're outside of the ordinance level, they wouldn't be grandfathered in. They would be required to come within the 15 miles.
Right. In fact, we have one police officer right now that tested for sergeant. It is following the collective bargaining agreement. And the current ordinance for police is it 20 road, Mon?
25.
Well, no, that's the collective bargaining.
Oh, yes, 20,
It's 20.
yes.
He is not able to be promoted to sergeant. He meets the collective bargaining agreement, but he does not meet the city ordinance. So we are already doing that.
So when we say grandfathered in, it's for current non-union people, not people who are.
No, we would, in order to do this, we would have to, anybody that is currently on the staff, both union or non-union, would be grandfathered in.
But again, if the non-union person was to get promoted, that grandfather clause would,
It would still apply to them.
they would have to move within 15.
No, it would be moved, they would have to apply with, I see what you're getting at, but so their current ordinance says 20 miles, so we would have to enforce that ordinance
Okay.
going forward. Does that clear?
Yes, it does. Thanks. Sorry for the
No.
confusion.
Chair,
Alderman Parker.
touching on this exact subject, I know who the person you're talking about, so he cannot be, if we pass this ordinance grandfathering, he still cannot be promoted.
That's correct.
I know I'll get a call on it, and I wanted to make sure I understood.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
One more thing I noticed in here, it says 15 radius miles from the fire station. Yeah, it may be a small thing, but we've got 3 fire stations. Which station will it be?
We can specify it's Central Station,
Okay, just going forward for the language.
or we can specify City Hall for all, and that's what Chief Townsend just said.
Okay, just as long as we have it clarified before we put it in final form. So, any other questions or comments?
Chair,
Alderman McClanathan.
I just note, if we don't do something to clean this up and get everything on the same page moving forward, the question will still remain as to these individuals that aren't in compliance, what are we gonna do with them?
Right.
I think it's a very soft and fair proposal to say, we're not looking backwards on it. But if we don't do anything on it, we're gonna have to look at them again, and then I'm not sure what the answer would be at that point.
Chair, I'm sorry.
Chief Bartow.
I got to understand this. I heard this only applies to new hires, but with the slide that we put up there, I'm 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 union members that are outside of the 15-mile. Now, if they can't be promoted, or they are exempt from this?
So the current ordinance is 20 miles. That's where it applies. They will be grandfathered under that 20 miles. They will not be applied, the 15 miles will not apply to them. The 20 miles will apply to them.
Okay, okay. No, the union. Oh, okay, it was getting kind of
Confusing to me.
confusing just a little bit about, of who it applies to and who it doesn't, that's all.
At this point right now, all the discussion should be pertaining to
No,
non-union
only.
Okay,
employees, okay?
sure.
Chair.
Alderman Flanagan.
But somebody who's currently in the system today will be and let's say they're becoming non-union at some points. The rules that will apply to them on that are the rules that are in effect today. The 15 miles, whether you're talking police or fire, are for prospective new employers, non-union, moving forward. If you are in employment as the date of prior to passing the ordinance, or in the date of passing the ordinance, the rules that are in place today are the ones that apply according to how we've asked that it be drafted at the next meeting. Now, we're gonna have to check and make sure that everybody's all got the language right. Does that answer the question you were asking?
Sure.
Chair, I hate to do this, but you said 20 miles and that's a police non-bargaining limit. What about the fire? Is that the 4 townships? Is it 15?
So right now, it says 4 townships, but we're not going to make anybody that is currently in the residence, that is currently there, that is currently at their location. We are not going to make them move.
And as far as taking a position that is non-bargaining, they have to move within the 15-mile radius, or is it 20?
Well,
I guess my question is, do we have 2 standards? We have 20 miles for non-bargaining police and 15 miles for non-bargaining fire? Aaron's nodding his head.
No, right now it's. Chair, right now you have 2 competing standards. It's 4 townships for fire, and it's 20 miles for police. The proposal is having both at 15 for non-union, moving forward on new hires.
To make it less complicated.
Voice my opinion here. I think that 5 miles is nothing today, and leave it, and give everybody 20 miles. This jacking with somebody that's gone and having him, well, now he's cutting it by 5 miles is ridiculous, so I'm against it. Thank you.
Chair.
Alderman Flanagan.
Alderman Parker, what would your proposal be for the vast majority of people who are not in compliance with our current ordinance?
Well, I agree with the grandfather if they're not in compliance, but I'd say make fire and police all at 20 miles. Just leave it as it is presently right now. That's my opinion.
Chair. Now, that's not where fire is right now,
Right.
but okay, all right.
I agree. Move them up to 20 and make everybody even. That's what I
Chair, that's what this ordinance is doing, right? Well,
Yes.
It's moving it to 15.
making everything even.
Yep.
It brings one down and up, one up, so it's kind of a even balance between the 2 then.
What's the council want to do for moving this forward, or?
Well, if somebody moves it forward, are they allowed, they must vote for it in a situation like this?
So the requirement is if you're the person to make the motion, move it forward, you cannot speak against it on the council floor. You can vote against it as we go forward, but you cannot speak against it if you're the person to make the motion to move it forward. But you can vote against it. Then the second, if there's a second, can both vote and speak against it according to Robert's rules, which we've adopted as our standard.
Chair,
Alderperson Bradshaw.
I'd like to make a motion to move it forward.
Second.
Motion on the floor, and a second to move this forward. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
One noted. Okay. Moving on to number 9, discussion regarding Gills and Mooring trash, recycle, landscape waste collection, and disposal contract. Manager Crowe?
Thank you, council. Before you, I actually, and we posted it online today for those that are watching, I have a new proposal for mooring. I have it that is placed in front of you. So the initial proposal, post last discussion in the committee of the whole, was a proposal for, that they gave to us, reduce the overall cost by $263,000. And then as we went forward, we countered, that's the top proposal you have there, that's what they gave us. We countered with reducing, keeping the overall end cost the same, and increasing or decreasing the start cost, backloading the back end of it. This was so that as we go into this, and so that everybody's aware, you know, they are currently, and I also put it in the article, if you'd read it over the, if you had an opportunity to read it over the weekend, their current cost is $1,893 per household. They're, that's including the transfer station. So then they countered back to me and said, all right, we'll do less of a build-up. We'll keep the $263,000 savings. We'll do less of a build-up starting with 2019, 2020, starting at 16, and then go 16, 15, 17. And they have, Gills and Mooring have withdrawn the loose garbage. They are strictly proposing the toters. They are having issues filling their positions, so the toters allow them to have older drivers that can do the pickup, and their investment on the toters is a little over $1 million between the toters and the equipment they have to do. So that's where the proposal, we had done a soft, Debbie and I had gone out to various communities, and I also talked to Roxanne. The Rockford right now is doing both, their cost is 21, 23. Most of the communities that are being bid right now are in the $19.5 to $22 range as we go forward. So I feel that the other issue is we talked about is that the transfer station and the contract for our garbage does not match by 3 years because of the transfer station contract, even though they were signed at the same time, did not kick in until the permit was issued for it. So when we went forward, and it's tied within the two contracts, that you have to do both garbage and the transfer station, right? When we went out and did soft inquiries out to the other large haulers, they were not interested in the transfer station going, and we gain $275,000 yearly from the transfer station, which is then applied to the landfill closure costs. Randy and I are looking at long-term weaning us off of the cost and the money of the transfer station so we can divest ourselves of the transfer station. That'll be a longer discussion from the council as we go forward. So those are the considerations when we went here, when we did the negotiations with them. I honestly believe that this is the last adjustment that they, and I think Randy would back up based upon the last discussion we had with them. We got into a little bit of a heated discussion with them. This last proposal they have is probably their last proposal that this is giving the $16 is their best price. that they can give us based upon the equipment that they have to invest in to go to the toter route. And I am standing by for any questions.
Mr. Chair.
Alderperson Bresch.
Thank you. I have 4 questions, if everybody would tolerate me just for a short moment. So this contract is up this June, Manager Crowe?
It's the end of June, but they are, as long as we're continuing to negotiate, they're willing to continue the contract.
And a follow-up on that. And so this is looking at a 10-year contract.
That's correct. So what we did was they initially came in with us at $20.05. So what we've done is negotiated them down, but then also spread the cost of everything over 10 years. And that's why we looked at that 10-year contract. And so that will be aligning both the transfer station, will allow us to weed ourselves off the transfer station as we go out.
My next question. Is this the staff recommendation to accept this proposal, which you believe is their final and best?
It is my recommendation to accept the proposal. We do have one more meeting with them on Wednesday, but this was what I got today from them. So,
my third question, is it true that Mooring and Gills are very short on staff, approximately 50 employees?
50 employees. So Gills is no longer an independent business. They are owned by Waste Connections, which is the 3rd largest, and they're having problems across the United States. They currently, for their contracts in this area of the country, they're currently short 47 people.
Okay, and my last question, number 4. As a constituent, would I be allowed to purchase garbage stickers, say if my tote was full, without having to purchase a second tote? For example, like at Christmas when everyone has extra garbage, trash, boxes, etc.
You would still be allowed to purchase stickers. The tote, however, so right now we're limited to 3 bags or a toter. I think it's a 36-gallon toter in the contract. This is a 96-gallon toter. Basically the toter would take 4 bags. This is can take up to 6 bags in this toter.
One more follow-up. I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. So the garbage man would have to get out of his truck to remove garbage bags if we purchased a sticker, say at the grocery mart, to put on the extra baggage.
That's correct.
And are we allowed to purchase a second toter, say if it was a large family with 6 children and needed?
We have a cost of a second toter. I don't have it here in front of it.
But that would be available to?
That would be available.
Okay, thank you.
Chair.
Alderperson Borman.
Manager Crowe, can you elaborate on why you believe this is going to be their best and last offer?
Based upon the discussions in the hour-and-a-half negotiations where they walked out and said, if you don't like our orders, you can pick up garbage via dump trucks.
If I follow up, did it appear that you had a chance to actually look in, if for what you can disclose, look at their profits, their books, and they're not making? They're not.
They are, and those numbers were the numbers that I passed in the paper. You know, it's $18.93 is what's costing them per household. $6 of that is going towards the running of the transfer station. That, and then we add an additional fee, nominal fee on our for administrative. Additionally, they are paying approximately 47 cents per month per household to allow us to do the dropping off of street sweeping material and material from the city at the transfer station.
And last question. Sure. It didn't seem like there were any alternative bidders or companies that could come in.
Well, when we went out and reached out to the bidders, that we had people that were interested initially in bidding with us, but once Aaron and I looked over the contracts and realized that they were tied together, we went back, and no one is interested in owning and running the transfer station. And because the two contracts are tied together, they decided that they would not bid on this. And based upon the bids that some of the other communities, like Pekin just bid their contract out to Waste Management, I believe it was Waste Management, either Waste Management or Waste Connections, they got a bid of $19.35 for the first year, $20 the second year, and $21 the third.
Sure.
Alderman Parker.
Probably a silly question here. Did we buy, then the residents buy them toters initially, or they supply?
So the toters are incorporated into the cost here, and they're delivered in each house. Each toter will be listed to each house.
And it's figured in on these prices and stuff?
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you.
Along with the upgrading of the trucks.
Mr. Chair.
Alderman McClanahan first.
With the transfer station contract expiring within the next couple of years, has there been or will there be discussion about an adjustment of the contract price in the events that that is dropped off?
That's going to be a discussion we have with them on Wednesday.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
And at the last discussion, that actually came up, that based upon the price we were coming out, we did not get into any further with that.
Mr. Chair. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify a point for Alderman Parker. I believe they told us that the toters will be barcoded and will stay with property. It was a question I had asked before. I don't think you were present that evening. Because with a lot of mobility, especially people that have rental properties, I wanted to know what would happen with those toters or if someone stole them. And they said that they would be barcoded and coded to that property, even the recyclables. The recycling toter will be picked up every other week. But they will remain with those properties if someone would move out.
Chair.
Alderperson Ross.
Okay, getting back to that, but if the resident damaged the toter, then he's responsible for,
The replacement of that, yes.
and that is at $75.
That's correct.
Chair. Alderman Misick.
So, question, Manager Crow, you mentioned that there was a $275,000 benefit for the transfer station, and then also you mentioned that there was like a $6 charge, for running the transfer station. So just multiplying that out, I was doing some shorthand math of that works out multiplied by the 9,700, gets you roughly 58,000. Is that a part of the?
So what they are doing is they're writing us a check for $275,000. They are taking that out of their own money and own.
I see.
So the $6 charge is what's costing them to run the transfer station on top of what we're having to do. So what happens is they are required by their contract to write us a $275,000 check every year, and that money's being used. So we have built that into the budget to pay for, and what they are saying is per household it's costing them, including that $275,000.
Okay.
And that's 97. You got to realize that that's 9,700 households per month. So it's $6 plus the 9,700 plus times the 9,700 times 12. So you're talking about, a little over $600,000.
Thank you.
Alderman Reverie.
Just observation, looking at the original proposal to the current one dated 6/5, you indicated before, Mr. Manager, that the total dollars over the years would be about the same, 14 million plus, give or take. But it looks at the rate of increase. The original proposal was driving this 7.8, 8.7, 8% a year increase. The more recent one is about 3 to 4% increase for the first
5 years.
5 years, and it jumps at least 10% in the sixth year. So that's, I guess people need to know what they're gonna be hit with.
Right.
Yes.
The first one maybe hits them higher, faster, but it spreads it out, not as dramatic, and I'm not sure how we feel about that approach, and maybe we don't have any options. So I'm not quite sure.
So and that's, so there's a combination of a couple things, the cost spread out that we asked them to do. And they've actually come down in cost, because the original contract was when we started this, was a little over 26 million. They've come down twice to us through the negotiations. So we were the ones that proposed the increase. They also asked for a 2.5% built-in CPI, which if you look at the CPI for garbage, which we did, there's a separate CPI for garbage and recycling. And the average recycling for waste for garbage was about 3.8%. So we're actually, there were 4 years, and where they got really behind here on the contracts, there were 4 years in the early 2000s that were over 10% in garbage CPI. And so, and they didn't come back and ask for an adjustment for that. And the city had built in the CPI that was getting, the regular CPI, not the garbage and CPI, because there is just like our contract, our ordinance for wastewater and water says we will use the wastewater and water CPI versus the regular CPI, because one of the things that runs on is for them is petroleum chemicals, petroleum cost, fuel cost, manpower. They are also affected by liability insurance cost of that.
Thank you.
Mr.
Further?
Chair.
Alderperson Bershaw.
Thank you. Manager Crowe, I do want to reach out and thank you for negotiating this with also Director Bucas, knowing that the garbage company felt like they were losing money to begin with, so you probably were dealing with a slight hostility there, especially when you're looking for the best rate for the public. I also appreciate your article in the paper explaining to the public the cost of garbage, and I hope that you will continue to keep that discussion open with the public, perhaps more articles. There again, we're going to take a beating, us on the council, with these rates going up, along with the other utility rates that are also going up, including the last $8, the last 888 that went up, and I'm still fielding calls on that one. So with all that said, I do want to thank you for all you've done, and I'm hoping you'll help us fight this battle of getting the notices out to the public that this isn't our fault. This is the cost of doing business, of picking up garbage. That is a business, and it's not a lot of choice for us, and we're doing the best we can to try to keep those costs down, at least in the immediate future. Thank you.
Chair.
Alderperson Borneman.
You mentioned, Manager Crowe, that other similarly situated communities are currently at about $19.50 a month.
That's correct.
Okay, and so under this proposal, we would stay under that amount up until about 2023.
That's correct.
Okay, and then even that day or that year, we'd be just at about $20.08 per month.
That's correct. And those communities have CPIs built into them.
Okay.
And so like Rockford, I mean, they're a larger community, but they're starting at 21, 23, and then they have a CPI built into them.
Okay, so I would imagine those residents in Rockford by 2023, they're going to be paying more than the 1950 that most communities are at. And we would be we'd be just over the 1950 that the average community is at as of today.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. I'll make a motion to move this forward.
Second.
Motion by Alderperson Borneman, seconded by Alderman Parker. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Looks like we are on to public comment. Tommy.
I wanted to ask you, but you guys do a good job doing about Dollar General. And Joey Moe, I like that when you add in the newspaper, in the mayor's report, you saying something about that they had that thing special one.
Yeah,
Fourth one, and we want to thank Todd Boggle come to Malcolm Eaton. It was a good time, and we want to do it next year.
Thank you, Tommy. Any other public comment? Seeing none, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion made by Alderperson Bradshaw, seconded by Alderman Ross. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried.
You put the two meetings together and kind of